Hey, what's up, everybody? BDO44 coming at you with another video. Alright, so I want to talk a little Lakers, but I didn't quite want to make this a video about the game tonight. I think I'll make a separate video about that. I kind of want to talk about the specifics of what bringing in Miles Turner could be about for the Lakers. Now, as you guys know, I'm on board. I want to bring in Miles Turner. I've wanted Miles Turner to be on this team all season long. I think he'll help us in a lot of areas, including solidifying, bringing LeBron and AD back down to their normal positions, which I think ultimately will be what's best for our team in the long run. Now, we can still have our little small ball lineup, still play LeBron at the center in some cases, but we need to have a center on the floor who's legitimate and solidified, who can make things happen for us and all of that. The problem is two things. This is the problem. I was listening to Dan, the Lakers fan. I just discovered his page, and he has some good stuff. Me and him kind of see the Lakers situation pretty much the same way. I don't think I've agreed with anybody as much as I agreed with him in watching his videos over the last week and a half. And one of the things that he brought up was something that I honestly hadn't thought of on my own. Dude said, if we bring in Miles Turner, are we sure we're going to play him? And it stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, yo, he's right. He's beyond right. This is a real concern we need to see ahead of time. If we bring in a center, are we sure Bron and Vogel are going to play the guy? What has happened with the last couple centers that we've brought in? Think back. Trez, how'd that work out? Didn't get nothing out of him. Drummond, how'd that work out? Barely used him. Dwight, both stints. 2020, he didn't play the whole Rocket series. This year, can't get on the floor. DJ looks as worse as he's ever looked. I mean, you go down the line of centers, J Huff we got, he ain't even been on the floor yet. For whatever reason, our team doesn't play centers. So if we go after a center, are we sure we're going to play him? Are we sure we're not going to get a shell of a version of himself because of how we run him? So while that's limited to the center position, in theory, we also have to look at the production of the players that we're bringing in just in general. Does anybody actually play their best as a Laker outside of LeBron James? Or is everyone playing a little slightly less than they could because of random stuff that happens here in LA that doesn't make them play their best? That seems to be a theme here. If you're watching Kyle Kuzma, he's a better player in Washington. You're watching B.I., he's a better player in New Orleans. Watching, Jordan Clarkson, these guys are better where they're at. Some of that has to do with the fact that they are young players who have grown into themselves over the last several years. But I think some of that has to do with the fact that the Lakers, and the way that we run systems, kind of take things away from players, takes them out of rhythm, puts them in positions to have to be complementary players for LeBron, which is a position in and of itself, regardless of what position you're playing. You have to do certain things to be a complement to him, the high usage player who needs you to be ready for a pass, to be ready for a screen, to be ready to just kind of relocate behind the three-point arc as he operates. Yes, you will get the ball. But doing all the stuff that you do to get you in rhythm, chances are that ain't how this works. You have to be of complement to him. Even AD, Westbrook, all of his co-stars, every co-star that's ever played with him, you're not getting the most out of that guy. Kevin Love, you're not getting the most out of that guy. Why? Because it's the Bron show. So, if this were a different situation, we're a different team, I feel real good about any trades that we're about to make. The problem I have is that dynamic, bringing anyone into that dynamic potentially puts them in a position to be lesser than what it is that we brought them here to be. There's no guarantee that Miles Turner is going to be the Pacers' Miles Turner here if we toss him in this system. And then we're highly predicated on certain things that don't allow him to be on the floor all the time. Now, granted, he can stretch the floor better than any of those centers that I mentioned. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to see him as a spacing liability. In theory, if our theory about centers is to play them sporadically. It just doesn't work. Especially with a guy who's still in his prime, still very much trying to, accomplish certain things in his career. He's not trying to come here and play 30 minutes. He's trying to come here and play 35. Do you see what I'm saying? And there's a difference. and it will reflect in his production and it will reflect in his value. So, do I want Miles Turner? Of course. If we're going to bring him here to be Miles Turner. If we're going to bring him here and play him like Trez or play him like Dwight, then hell no, we don't need to bring him in. We need to continue to go after players that we're actually going to get the most out of. If we want to, die on the LeBron James at center heel, then we have to get ourselves some players that are going to help us get the maximum opportunity out of that. In my opinion, I don't think such a thing exists. I really don't. Small ball is, I was going to say a bad word, but I don't like small ball. I think it's human waste. I think basketball is supposed to be played above the rim, and if you have a bunch of short guys out there, you're at a disadvantage, and I don't care how talented they are. Unless they could jump higher than the tall people, they're not going to win the game. And that's what I think of small ball. You talk about spacing the floor all you want. If you're not doing anything to get players off of the floor, meaning if you're not drawing fouls, if you're not being aggressive, you're not going to get the foul called. If you're not drawing fouls, you're going up against their best players for as long as they choose to keep them out there. You know what I mean? We remove our best players from the floor for reasons that don't make no sense. In situations where you're playing basketball properly, they're removing players off the floor because they're in foul trouble. And you're not going to get anybody in foul trouble if you ain't doing nothing but shooting threes all night. You got to get in the paint. You have to use size. You have to bang people in order for the whistles to be blown. You only get 6 fouls, which means once those good players that are shooting the ball, doing all that pretty stuff against you, start picking up their second and third fouls, that's when coaches start removing those guys off the floor. So you got to make sure you're in the paint to put them in that position. You got to put them at a disadvantage so you're not facing their true game plan all night long. People use this small ball, spread the floor crap as if it's the only way basketball can be played so long as everybody's spreading the floor. But that is a optical illusion. You have to take into account that a center who bangs and someone who plays in the paint is going to get those shooters in foul trouble. Then you're going to be going up against second units. We'll see how well they spread the floor then when they got guys who can only shoot or they got guys who can't shoot at all but do everything else. You put yourself in a position to have to go up against those guys when you get their best players in foul trouble. Not only do you throw their game plan off, but you put yourself in a position to go up against lesser talent in theory because the bench is not as talented as the starters in some cases. Not all, but in most. So that's the value of a Shaq. That's the value of a Giannis, somebody who's in the paint, dunking on people, drawing fouls. Remember, they get the best players off of the floor because them same shooters are the same guys over there backpedaling, swiping, swinging, trying to draw charges and all kinds of stuff that put them in a position to put fouls calls on themselves, getting them off the floor. So keep that in mind. This spread the floor nonsense. We can't use the center because we can't shoot. Everybody's shooting. How are we going to? That's bullcrap. That's a lie. That's a lie. Yes, you may give up an extra 3 here and there, but you know what you don't give up? A bunch of offensive rebounds. You know what you don't give up? Opportunities for the best player on the other team to continue to get rhythm jump shots right over you anyway. Short players can't block jump shots. Short players, all they can do is contest the best they can and get shot over each and every time in the paint and the perimeter. So having short guys out there just to help your offense is going to leave you with scores that look like 135 to 119 with you on the wrong side of it. I don't think I could be more clear than that. So I think the best solution for us is to change our philosophy simultaneously while changing this roster. Because if we bring in players that are going to help us with areas that we aren't going to use, then what we have is dead weight coming in. And that's obviously what we don't need. So that's where my head is, man. But if we get a coach down there who values this aspect of basketball that I'm talking about, and then you bring in Miles Turner, voila, you get the best out of Miles Turner. It's the vision I have for the team. I'm bringing in the player I want to see help us, and he'll do that. But if we continue as business as usual, we bring in Miles Turner, barely play him, he's going to be unhappy. We're going to get less out of him. And that's going to be how they go. So nobody wants that. So it's all about the Lakers and their philosophy. They seem hell-bent on small ball. And, we're getting the results that come with that. We are getting the results that come with that. I like the idea that we're looking for a center, and I applaud Rob. It's what I've told him to do. But now that Dan has brought this to my mind and brought this to my attention, now my mindset is, nah, bro, I don't feel so good about it. I think we should probably use that on a player that's less likely to be benched by our coach. Jeremy Grant is a small ball complement player that they're probably going to want to run at center and power forward all the time. Now, power forward is definitely where he should be. Center, small ball lineups, I think he could probably pull it off. But that's kind of where we need to go. It's not really my preference. That's not what I like. Don't get it twisted. I want Jeremy Grant on this team. That ain't what I'm saying. But I don't want him playing center. I don't want him playing small ball. I want him playing the 4. I want him playing the 3. You know what I mean? And I think that makes us a much better team if we even move him around to the 2 in some cases. I believe in big ball lineups. Give me the opposite of small ball, bro. I want everybody massive. I want to be like Milwaukee. I want to be like Lakers back in 2009 when we had Lamar and Powell and obviously Bynum. And then Kobe was a superstar who was the shortest person out there. We would never lose. Even in games we were supposed to lose, we wouldn't lose because we had so much size. And don't tell me about spreading the floor. Dallas was around. Phoenix was around. There were teams that shot. Sacramento was around. Golden State had just gotten started. They had shooting teams out there who were spreading the floor. Orlando did it with a center. You can do that without turning yourself into a bunch of munchkins out there. You could literally do that. It's just this small ball Golden State era lineup that makes people think that's the only way the game's supposed to be played. No different than in the 70s and 80s when they thought that you couldn't play at all without a big man. We just need to get out of the era we're in, zoom out, look at basketball as a whole, since we've learned many different ways of playing it, and start experimenting some of them old ways with this new era. I promise you'll have a lot more success than it says you have on paper because of the foul aspect that I explained to you earlier. You're going to get those shooters off the floor. Just don't be afraid of size. And also something was mentioned as well. They said they don't want to play a center because the spacing is so bad with Russell Westbrook and the center out there if the center can't shoot. Well, newsflash, buddy, I hate to break this to you, but Russell Westbrook's the player that needs to come off the floor, not the center. You remove Russell Westbrook from the floor, do you know what you remove? You remove turnovers. You remove missed free throws. You remove missed shots. You remove a lot of things that you don't want. And he's short. Not a short person in real life, taller than me, but I'm saying he's short for a basketball player. So that means he doesn't help you with the issues that you really actually need help with. Putting him on the floor over a center opens up more holes than it closes. You need that big man on the floor. He's the guy that can be removed from the lineup to help better the circumstance, not the center position itself. When the Rockets removed the center position, they got extremely, extremely more deficient. Yeah, they were able to stretch the floor, but they weren't able to beat anybody in the playoffs. You got no center out there. And we want to duplicate that formula? The Rockets, when they traded away Clint Capella for a bunch of stuff they couldn't use, and you think that's a good idea as a Laker? Look how that worked for them. But we want to remove the center. And I know why we want to remove the center, because it's making LeBron look great. He's playing the best basketball of his career, and he doesn't have to play the perimeter as much. Doesn't have to chase people out the defensive stuff as much. It makes him feel better. He can have a maximum potential to beat whoever's on the other end of him at the center position. Great. It makes him look great. Him alone. And as a result, we're 500 basketball club. And here's something that is also a bit perturbing. The notion that we're waiting for Anthony Davis to come back from injury to play the center position. I don't know how best to say this, but neither LeBron nor AD should ever be asked to play the center. Neither one of them. It's not because they can't beat centers. They both can destroy centers. It's because they both can't defend the center position. Neither one of them rebound well enough to play the center position. Neither one of them are physical enough at this stage of their careers to bang with real physical players. Who they going to be banging with? It's why we're 500, y'all. It's not because we've been missing players. I hate to break it to you, but the philosophy of what we're running is why we've lost some of the games we've lost. Not because of the lack of players or the lack of talent. It's the stuff we were doing with that. Those players. Wasn't working. It's philosophy, it's strategy. It's bad. So you could bring in the best players in the world. You could bring in some more good players. It ain't going to matter if we're still running the same way, doing the same things, not matching up with players. Not matching up with rosters, rather. Leaving rebounds out there. Letting guys lay up over us. Your problem is schematic, Lakers. And, earlier in the month, I was screaming fire the coach. Then he did some things that made me say, okay, it's cool. I'm kind of digging him. And this last game happened and erased all of that for me. put me right back in the space where how I felt when I was screaming fire him. But I'm screaming something different right now. I'm not screaming fire Frank Vogel necessarily, because he's going to be up and down, up and down, up and down. What I'm saying is disarm LeBron James of the power that he has to determine whether or not we're going to do things to make him look good and us look bad. Because if that's what we're doing, we're going to suck, and he's going to ride off into the sunset, and it's going to be with one championship ring. And that is some bull crap. Some bull crap. I'm not buying that. We didn't give up all that we gave up, all them assets that could have netted us a plethora of different possibilities, so that we can buy ourselves one championship and then the rest will be as bad as we were when the kids were here. We did not do all of that for this. So I just feel like the Lakers need to revamp their thinking. I'm not saying we need to fire anybody. I'm just saying we need to get it in our minds that the things that we've been doing are going to continue to fail. That's what needs to happen. Then build from that notion. As long as you're continuing to work under the idea that this is going to work, we're going to get getting the same results. That's what I know. So that's what I want to say, man. Hopefully Miles Turner lands in a place that doesn't treat him as bad as I'm expecting us to treat him. That's really what I got to say. Because we don't seem to respect that big man position or center position at all. And we would much rather LeBron James look great than for us to actually play great, it seems. My name is BDF4. Thank y'all for watching. I'm out.